All right, so this is probably going to be the single least surprising story that I've covered all week because we have yet another massive increase to the Pentagon budget here in the United States. And of course, it is being done along bipartisan lines. You know, we always got to love that precious bipartisanship, specifically when it comes to serving the military industrial complex, as is very obviously the case in this story. So here from Politico, they say senators tack $45 billion onto Biden's defense budget, okay, which was already a record Pentagon budget from the year before. So let's just go ahead and read into some of the details here. They say the Senate Armed Services Committee has endorsed a $45 billion increase to President Joe Biden's military spending plans in its annual defense policy bill, blowing past the administration's Pentagon budget for a second straight year. And they say the rebuke of Biden's budget plans, which occurred during the panel's closed-door markup of the National Defense Authorization Act this week, comes after lawmakers added roughly $30 billion to the White House's previous defense spending proposal. So even though we just pulled out of Afghanistan, ended a nearly 2 decades long war, somehow we need even more money than the years prior to this. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars. I mean, it's estimated that like roughly $20 billion a year in adequate investments and efficient investments would completely eradicate homelessness in the United States. But no, we can't do that because, that would be helping average working class people. We got to give this money to the, precious defense contractors and weapons manufacturers who are profiting off of bloodshed and war. So, I mean, $30 billion on the last budget, $45 billion in an additional increase on this budget. And of course, this is all being decided by the Senate Armed Services Committee. The same Senate Armed Services Committee, in which many members of this committee have direct personal investments in the same exact weapons manufacturers who are profiting from these increases to the Pentagon budget. I wonder if there might be a conflict of interest in this, but they continue here with more details, saying this week's boost brings the bill's top-line budget figure to $847 billion. $847 billion, while we are simultaneously being told that we can't afford free college, universal, paid maternity leave, universal health care for that matter, lowering prescription drug prices. None of that. Can't have it because we got to be dumping $847 billion per year. And guess what? Probably going to increase again next year as we push closer and closer towards World War III electric boogaloo. But I mean, anyways, they continue here saying the goal, he said, according to this, the chairman, Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, he said, the goal is to counteract runaway inflation, to aid Ukraine, replenish weapons sent into the fight against Russia, and fund military priorities left out of the Pentagon budget request. Okay, hold on. To counteract runaway inflation. I thought, as conservatives are saying basically on a daily basis now, that increases in government spending is what increases inflation. That's what we're being told over and over and over again. No, wait, that only applies to government spending that may happen to help working class families across this country. I guess when it comes to the Pentagon budget, when it comes to shoveling out tens of billions of dollars in excess money to these weapons manufacturers, to the military industrial complex, that somehow that is going to counteract runaway inflation. In this case, I guess that's just the magic of conservative economics. But they also say to aid Ukraine. Okay, to aid Ukraine. All right, I just covered this in my video a couple days ago. We've already given them more money in funding, like upwards of almost $60 billion at this point. More money in funding than we have given to any other country in the post-World War II era. More money than even the State Department has in their funding. And so, we're giving them tens and tens of billions of dollars. It's not even clear where a lot of these weapons are going. The State Department has admitted that themselves. And on top of that, this doesn't even appear to be effective in terms of actually halting or pushing back the Russian invasion. It seems like, again, as I talked about in my video yesterday or the day before that, that Ukraine's negotiating position at the table is only going to get weaker over time. If this is becoming a war of attrition, it's only going to be one that's going to more and more so favor Russia in the long run. So getting to the diplomatic talks as quickly as possible should be the focus right now. But no, we got to give tens of billions of dollars and disingenuously use the war in Ukraine and in an effort to basically justify jacking up our military spending. But they also say replenish weapons sent into the fight against Russia. So again, tying that back to the same exact point, kind of gives you a perspective in terms of why their priority might be on continuing this increase to the Pentagon budget instead of pushing for diplomacy in Ukraine. They obviously have a personal financial incentive in order to ratchet up this military spending spending and to continue the war in Ukraine so that they can continue this circular downwards spiral or upward spiral in this case with the Pentagon funding. But they continue here saying the Senate Armed Services increase is the highest bid so far for military spending for the coming fiscal year. The House is expected to make its own push to increase Pentagon spending. So again, you got both chambers of Congress basically just competing for who could serve the military-industrial complex the best. But they continue saying still, the NDAA only authorizes spending and would need to be backed up by funding legislation produced by the House and the Senate appropriations panels. I highly doubt that there's going to be any pushback whatsoever to this. But they say Biden sought $813 billion for national defense in his fiscal 2023 budget, including $773 billion for the Pentagon. Roughly $10 billion of the $813 falls outside the armed services jurisdiction. And they say, but Republicans have been pushing for a substantial increase, arguing for a 3 to 5% increase from the current year's level above inflation. So you're already going above and beyond what even inflationary pressures would justify in the first place. So obviously that was a bullshit excuse, but they say the current year's enacted level for the NDAA is $768 billion. And they also have a quote here again from Reid telling reporters on Thursday that the historic inflation was the first consideration in boosting the top line. Again, when it comes to aiding poor people, the most vulnerable people within society, people who have to work multiple jobs in order to just make ends meet, when it comes to potential stimulus that would help their material conditions, that's only going to somehow magically worsen inflation. Whereas when you give infinite sums of money to these defense contractors, that somehow is going to lessen inflation or to help them cope with inflation. Almost like there's a little bit of a contradiction there. Now, on the other hand, we do have progressives within Congress that are trying to propose some sort of cuts to the Pentagon budget. This one is led by Representatives Lee and Pocan. Pocan, obviously one of the chairs of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Barbara Lee, also a massive figure within the progressive movement within Congress, has always been on the right side of especially military subjects for the most part. But they're proposing $100 billion in cuts to the Pentagon budget. So, I mean, honestly, this doesn't even go far enough. We could cut the Pentagon budget literally in half and we would still be spending more than any other country on the face of the planet, probably more than the next couple countries combined. So, $100 billion is measly crumbs, but that still has essentially no chance of passing. I mean, if we're going to be real about this and the situation that we have here in the United States. I mean, listen, when you have multi-billion-dollar corporations like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, etc., that are able to funnel money into the campaigns of a lot of these politicians, even the ones that sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee, who, oh, by the way, also have personal investments in those same exact corporations that are giving them these bribes. When you have that type of a political dynamic, then bipartisanship is always going to result in this. I mean, this goes for Democrats, it goes for Republicans as well, obviously, but this is what bipartisan compromise is always going to yield results. It's always going to yield the best results for corporate America, the billionaire class, and the military-industrial complex that has been consistent for literally decades in this country. So, I mean, they got billions and billions of dollars for infinite weapons to send to Ukraine, billions of dollars to give to these weapons manufacturers and defense contractors, and somehow it's impossible to justify any sort of stimulus actually to the benefit of the American people because we have to use it to, spend on bombing innocent men, women, and children overseas in countries that we have absolutely no business being involved in.